He lived with the guilt of having left the dog behind on his last day of service. Years later, he discovered that a kind gentleman had adopted the dog and cared for him as if he were his own. When he saw the animal running toward the soldier, his eyes filled with tears. No one dared say a word, because everyone knew that a moving story of sacrifice and devotion was about to be revealed. Corporal Daniel Stone tightened his grip on the old journal as he stepped off the rusted bus into the quiet town of Greenfield. 7 years had passed since his deployment, 7 years since he last saw the war-torn streets of Adamar. No one in Greenfield knew much about that place. Only that Daniel had fought in a conflict far from home and come back a changed man. He had a slight limp in his right leg, earned the day he lost track of his canine partner, Bravo. For years, he told himself that Bravo was safe, that the military had found the dog a good home. But deep inside, he couldn't forget the last time they were together, under enemy fire, the dog refusing to leave his side. Then, in the confusion of retreat, they were separated. Now, rumors hinted that Bravo might be somewhere in this region, a whisper that had led Daniel here. The town itself looked trapped in time. Wooden storefronts with peeling paint lined the main street. A single cafe stood at the corner, serving as both a coffee shop and bakery, and the swirling aroma of fresh bread was almost enough to lift Daniel's spirits. Almost. The war had taught him never to trust fleeting comforts. Shifting his duffel bag onto his shoulder, he made his way toward a modest inn recommended by one of the locals he had questioned the week before. He hoped that here, in this unremarkable place, he might finally find the dog he had trained, fought beside, and lost. At the inn's reception, an elderly woman with kind eyes greeted him and offered a gentle smile. "You must be the veteran fella folks have been talking about," she said, passing him a worn key with a small wooden tag. "We're grateful for your service. If there's anything you need, just ask." Her warmth momentarily disarmed him, reminding him how different small-town life was from the war zones he had known. He thanked her quietly and headed upstairs, each wooden step creaking beneath his boots. In his room, Daniel set down his bag and sank onto the bed. He flipped open the journal, a keepsake from those days in Adamar. It contained training notes for Bravo, photos taped alongside scribbled instructions. The first page showed an eager German shepherd puppy, all ears and paws, staring at the camera with fearless eyes. The next pages documented Bravo's progress, how quickly he learned obedience drills, how sharp his senses became, how unwavering his loyalty was to Daniel. The final entry was a half-finished update about a mission they never completed. A mortar attack changed everything that day, sending Daniel one way and Bravo another. Ever since, Daniel's chest felt hollow, as though part of his heart had been left in that crumbling city. He rose and gazed out the window. From the second floor, he could see Greenfield's main street meandering toward fields of tall grass. Somewhere beyond that horizon, people whispered that a war dog had been spotted, an older German shepherd with scars along his flank. Daniel asked himself the same question he'd asked 100 times. Could that really be Bravo? The next morning, he woke at dawn, wincing at the ache in his leg. The innkeeper had left coffee and biscuits in a small lounge area downstairs. An old radio crackled from the corner, broadcasting local news. Daniel heard rumors of livestock theft in nearby farms, talk of strange footprints near barns, and sightings of a large dog prowling at night. Locals blamed stray packs for lost chickens and broken fences, but Daniel's instincts told him something else might be going on. For Bravo to survive alone, he would have needed to adapt, perhaps drifting between farms in search of shelter, or even trusting the wrong kind of people. He headed outside, grateful for the crisp morning air that cleared his mind. The sunrise tinted the sky with ribbons of pink and gold. Each step past the sleepy storefronts reminded him how far from Adamar he truly was. He had an address in his pocket. Willow Creek Farm, a place where that rumored dog had last been sighted. According to the locals, Willow Creek belonged to a man named Garrett Lawson, a gruff farmer known for his reclusive nature and distrust of outsiders. Daniel secured a ride with an aging farmer who was on his way toward the outlying fields. They bounced down dirt roads flanked by endless rows of corn and wheat, the air thick with the scent of freshly tilled earth. The farmer, wearing overalls splattered with mud, regarded Daniel kindly. "Hope you find what you're looking for," he said, as they neared the farm's driveway. "That fella Lawson don't take too well to strangers, but maybe your uniform will mean something to him. Heard he served too a long time ago." Willow Creek Farm appeared beyond a bend in the road, a sprawling tract of land with a weather-beaten barn, several chicken coops and pastures stretching into the distance. A faded American flag hung beside the main gate, swaying in the gentle breeze. Daniel exited the farmer's truck with a nod of thanks, then limped toward the farmhouse. Each step sent a flicker of pain through his leg, a reminder of how thoroughly war marked him. He knocked on the door. Silence. He knocked again, calling out, "Mr. Lawson?" Finally, an elderly man in a flannel shirt and jeans opened the door. A wiry gray beard framed his stern expression. He looked Daniel over with suspicious eyes. "Name's Daniel Stone," Daniel said, forcing a polite smile. "I served overseas and heard a rumor that a dog was seen around these parts. A German shepherd, older, possibly with a scar on his right side. I'm trying to find him." Lawson's gaze flickered, revealing a moment of recognition. "Ain't my job to keep track of strays," he grumbled. "Why's it matter to you?" Daniel shifted, uneasy with discussing personal matters. "Because if it's the dog I think it is, we served together. He saved my life once." His voice trembled slightly. "I owe it to him to bring him home." A long pause followed. Lawson rubbed his weathered hands together. "He's been sniffing around my fields a couple nights a week. Used to spook my sheep, but he never harmed them. A guard dog, from what I can tell. Checks perimeter fences, then disappears. Don't come near me, though, like he don't trust nobody." Relief and anticipation coursed through Daniel. "Do you know where he goes after that?" Lawson shrugged. "Sometimes heads toward Old Mill Road, sometimes the forest behind Harlow's orchard. Fella's cunning, moves like he's on patrol. Don't let anyone get close. If that's your dog, you got your work cut out for you." Daniel thanked the farmer and headed toward the barn, scanning the surroundings for any sign of paw prints or stray fur. Inside, the barn smelled of hay and aged wood. Dust motes floated in beams of sunlight. It was quiet except for the distant clucking of hens. He noticed faint marks on the ground, like a dog's footprints, leading to an open back door. Could these belong to Bravo? He stepped outside into the wide pasture. The horizon stretched endlessly, a patchwork of fields merging with the sky. Daniel decided to follow the footprints, continuing past a low fence and along a grassy path that wound toward a cluster of trees. Every so often he paused to kneel and inspect the ground. Yes, more paw prints. His pulse quickened. An hour passed as he trudged deeper into the rural landscape. His leg burned with each step, and sweat trickled down his temple under the morning sun. Yet he pressed on, driven by hope. That was when he spotted movement between the trees, a flash of gray and tan fur. Daniel froze, scarcely daring to breathe. A shape emerged, a German shepherd, taller now, more muscular than the puppy in Daniel's old photographs, but with the same proud stance. On his right flank, a jagged scar. For a moment, Daniel forgot the ache in his body, forgot the years that had passed. "Bravo," he whispered, his voice cracking. The dog raised his head, eyes dark and alert. Slowly, Daniel extended his hand. Memories of gunfire and dust swarmed Daniel's mind, mingling with the hope in his chest. Bravo stared at him, ears twitching. Then, the dog bolted into the woods. Heart hammering, Daniel cursed the limp that slowed his chase. But he couldn't abandon this lead. He followed the rustling undergrowth, calling out gently, "Bravo, it's me, I'm here." The forest thickened, branches scraping at his jacket, the ground uneven beneath him. Finally, near a narrow stream, he caught another glimpse of Bravo. The dog had stopped, watching Daniel with a wary expression. Daniel sank to one knee, arms raised in a gesture of peace. "I thought you were gone," he murmured, voice trembling. "All these years, I'm sorry I lost you." Bravo stayed still, tail lowered, uncertain. Daniel could see the tension in the dog's stance, ready to flee or fight. "It's okay," Daniel continued, reaching carefully into his pocket for a small treat. "Remember these, buddy?" He tossed the treat softly, and it landed a foot away from Bravo's paws. The dog sniffed the air, ears shifting. Slowly, Bravo took a step forward, lowered his muzzle, and picked up the morsel. For a brief second, Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. Could this really be the same dog who had braved explosions and bullets by his side? In that fragile moment, Daniel felt the bond between them spark again, but as quickly as it came, it vanished. Something cracked in the distance, a branch maybe, and Bravo leaped back, tension surging through his body. The dog turned and sprinted through the dense foliage before Daniel could get close enough to even touch him. Daniel sat there breathing hard, heart pounding like it would burst. He knew now. The rumors were true. Bravo was alive, war-toughened, scarred, still vigilant. But something else lingered in the dog's eyes. A distrust, perhaps shaped by harsh experiences after they were separated. If Daniel wanted to bring him home, he would have to earn Bravo's trust all over again. That night, back at the inn, Daniel couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the encounter over and over. Scenes of gunfire from Adamar merged with the image of Bravo running through the trees. Could he blame the dog for being hesitant? They had once been inseparable, but time had put a gulf between them. Daniel resolved to try again, to do whatever it took to make Bravo understand he was safe now. Would fate allow their bond to mend, or would the burdens of the past push them further apart? If this story caught your attention, don't forget to let us know your thoughts. And tell us, have you ever experienced a reunion that changed your life? Stay with us as we continue. Daniel woke before dawn, determined to search the forest again. Every muscle in his body protested, but his resolve burned brighter than the ache. After the chance encounter with Bravo, he couldn't sit idle. He stuffed energy bars and water into a small backpack, along with a handful of treats in case he found the dog again. The sky was still dark when he left the inn, the dim street lamps casting long shadows across the pavement. A local cat scurried past him, fleeing beneath a parked truck. Somewhere a rooster crowed, heralding another country morning. Daniel's limp was less pronounced once he'd warmed up, though he still leaned on a makeshift walking stick he'd fashioned from a sturdy branch. Part of him worried that if he pressed on too fast, he'd miss a clue or startle Bravo again. Another part of him wanted to sprint, ignoring the pain. In the distance, an old water tower loomed against the slowly brightening sky, a silent witness to his mission. He whispered, "Hang in there, Bravo. I'm coming." Stepping off the paved road, Daniel entered a world of rustling leaves and earthy scents. Each footfall sank into soft ground. Though he'd studied countless maps, the forest felt vaster than it appeared on paper. A labyrinth of towering oaks and twisted undergrowth. Occasionally, a rabbit darted across his path, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Daniel paused frequently, scanning for signs of paw prints. He found some near a narrow creek, the shallow water shimmering with early light. His heart beat faster as he traced the impressions in the damp soil, definitely from a larger dog. Before the war, Daniel might not have distinguished them so easily, but his canine training had honed his awareness. He noticed slight drag marks, perhaps from that old wound Bravo had sustained. A faint pang of guilt tugged at Daniel's chest. If only he'd held on to Bravo's leash more tightly that day, or reacted a split second sooner, maybe they wouldn't have been separated at all. Now each print in the mud told a story of survival, of a bond that refused to fade. 2 hours later, he emerged onto a small clearing where wildflowers blanketed the ground. The sun had risen fully, painting petals in vivid yellows and pinks. In the middle of this meadow stood a dilapidated cabin, its roof caved in on one side. Daniel approached cautiously, mindful that Bravo could be resting inside, or that someone else might have claimed the space. War had taught him never to underestimate the danger in abandoned places. Nudging the splintered door open, he peered through swirling dust motes. The interior smelled of mildew, and broken floorboards revealed a partial basement below. Daniel's voice echoed as he quietly called Bravo's name. No sound came back. Yet in a corner he discovered an old blanket layered with shed dog fur. He bent down, rubbing the coarse strands between his fingers. Was it truly Bravo's? He couldn't be certain, but it looked fresh. A wave of renewed determination coursed through him. Wherever Bravo wandered, he seemed to return here to rest. Daniel tucked a small treat near the blanket, hoping Bravo might accept this silent gesture of friendship when no one was watching. Exiting the cabin, Daniel noticed tire tracks behind the structure. They cut across the grass and led into a dirt path flanked by wild blackberry bushes. Who would drive out here? The local farmers usually had well-worn trails on their own land. Could it be hunters, or someone else entirely? Daniel decided to follow the tracks, staying alert for anything suspicious. Not long after, he stumbled upon an area where the bushes were crushed, as if a vehicle had backed in. Empty food cans were scattered about, alongside a few discarded cigarette butts. He knelt to inspect them. The brand wasn't familiar, but the half-faded text on the labels hinted at foreign import. His instincts sparked caution. He recalled rumors of small-time poachers or unscrupulous individuals who trapped stray dogs to sell them elsewhere. Could Bravo have crossed paths with people who'd exploit him for personal gain? Daniel's jaw tightened. The dog had been a loyal soldier, risking his life to protect human comrades. The thought of Bravo in some makeshift cage or forced to guard criminals made Daniel's blood boil. One thing was certain: he had to act fast. As midday approached, the sun beat down and Daniel's fatigue began to set in. He paused by the creek to refill his water and ate a few bites of a protein bar. The memory of Bravo's younger days filled his mind. The way the dog would nudge Daniel's helmet or muzzle his boots, insisting on an early morning run. They'd sprint around the base, Bravo's tongue lolling happily. After the run, Bravo would sit, ears perked, waiting for Daniel's command. That unwavering focus had saved Daniel from stepping on a hidden landmine once. Now, he wondered if that same sharp intuition kept Bravo safe while roaming these unknown acres. Looking at his reflection in the water's surface, Daniel barely recognized the hardened expression. The war had stolen something from him, some piece of innocence. Yet seeing Bravo again, even from a distance, rekindled a glimmer of hope. If he could rescue Bravo, maybe he could also reclaim part of himself. That evening he returned to the inn, mentally and physically exhausted. The elderly innkeeper stood behind the counter, her weathered hands sorting letters. She greeted Daniel with sympathy when he limped inside. "Did you find that dog?" Daniel shook his head. "Not yet," he admitted, his voice laced with weariness. She slid a small envelope across the counter. "Someone left this for you about an hour ago. Didn't give a name." Instantly alert, Daniel tore it open. The note inside read, "Heard you're looking for a shepherd. Come to the old stable on Redwood Lane after sundown." No signature, just that cryptic direction. His pulse quickened. Who would know about Bravo's whereabouts? And why be so secretive? The innkeeper frowned as she eyed the grim line of his mouth. "Hope it's nothing dangerous." Daniel offered a tight nod. "So do I," he said, heading up to his room. Everything felt uncertain, but the chance of a lead was too precious to ignore. If there was even a slim hope of finding Bravo, Daniel was willing to risk it. Darkness descended quickly over Greenfield. The sky held a scattering of stars when Daniel slipped out of the inn, heading for Redwood Lane. Lamplight illuminated patches of the street, but soon gave way to a moonlit stretch of gravel. He gripped a flashlight, scanning for signs of movement. In the distance, the silhouette of an old stable emerged, a sagging structure encircled by waist-high weeds. The wind rustled through the nearby pines, lending an eerie hush to the air. Daniel's heart thumped. He half expected an ambush. When he stepped inside the stable's broken doorway, stale hay crunched underfoot, and the faint odor of manure lingered. "Hello?" he called, voice echoing against wooden walls. No answer came. He took a few cautious steps forward. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a lean man in a tattered jacket, face obscured by a baseball cap. "You're the soldier," the man said, voice low. "I know where your dog is." Before Daniel could speak, the stranger pressed a folded paper into his hand. "If you want to save him, follow these directions, but come alone." Daniel's pulse hammered as he clutched the folded note. That stranger's voice echoed in his mind. "Come alone, or the dog suffers." In the stable's shadows, Daniel had tried to question him, but the man vanished, leaving only cryptic directions. Now, back in his inn room, he stared at the paper under dim lamplight. Coordinates, scribbled in shaky handwriting, plus the phrase, "sunset, no weapons, no police." Anger, worry, and a swirl of suspicions churned in Daniel's head. Who was that man? And how had he gotten hold of Bravo? The thought that someone might be using the dog as bait made Daniel's stomach clench. He spread out a local map across the small desk, matching the coordinates with the forested area east of Greenfield. Marking the spot, he remembered the scattered tire tracks he'd found near the abandoned cabin. Everything pointed to a hidden operation deeper in the woods. Could these people be involved in dog trafficking? His mind conjured grim images of Bravo in chains, forced to fight or guard illegal contraband. Daniel clenched his fists, resolved to do whatever it took to save him. Even the lingering ache in his leg couldn't dissuade him. He only had until sundown to formulate a plan. Tomorrow could be too late. Outside, clouds gathered. Daniel checked his gear. Flashlight, bottled water, a folding knife for emergencies. No guns, but he wouldn't show up unprepared. Afternoon wore on, each hour thick with tension. Daniel forced down a simple lunch of bread and cheese, his appetite dulled by worry. Every so often he glanced out the window, expecting a vehicle to appear or some threat to materialize. None did. He replayed the stable encounter, analyzing every word and gesture. The man's caution suggested something bigger than a simple stray dog situation, perhaps a smuggling ring or worse. As the sun inched toward the horizon, Daniel fidgeted with his watch. In war, timing was everything. Now it felt the same. If Bravo was captive, Daniel had one chance to break him free. He had no backup, no official resources, only his will and memories of a brave dog. Determined, he waited for dusk to make his move. The drive to the coordinates took him down winding back roads flanked by looming pines. The fading sunlight painted the sky in oranges and purples, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel harder with each mile. At last, he found a dirt path branching off from the main road. The note's scribbled numbers indicated this was the place. He killed the engine, heart pounding as silence enveloped him. Clouds shrouded the moon, giving the clearing a spectral quality. Slowly he exited the vehicle, scanning the darkness with his flashlight. Ahead, a barn stood, half collapsed, as though sagging under its own secrets. Somewhere, a bird called, and the wind hissed through the pines. Daniel pressed forward, alert, every sense tingling. He had to see Bravo again. A rustling in the brush made him freeze. The stranger from the stable stepped into the narrow beam of light, raising a hand to shield his face. "Told you to come alone," he muttered. Daniel nodded, his tone tense. "Where's my dog?" The man jerked his head toward the barn. "They've got him locked inside, along with others." Daniel's gut twisted. "Others?" "Yeah, they've been collecting strays, some trained, some not. Planning to sell them across the border." His lip curled in disgust. "I signed up thinking it was just a job, but I didn't sign on for cruelty, so I sent you that note." Thunder rumbled overhead as Daniel tried to steady his breathing. "How many men inside?" "Maybe 3 or 4, the stranger replied. "Armed." He sounded regretful. Determination rose in Daniel, mingling with anger. "All right, show me how to get close without them noticing." The stranger hesitated, then motioned for Daniel to follow. They skirted the barn's perimeter, moving through tall grass slick from rain. Finally, they crouched behind a rusted tractor. A dim light glowed through the barn's slats, and muffled barking echoed from within. Daniel felt his chest tighten at the sound of dogs trapped or frightened. "Go around back," the stranger whispered. "There's a side door they hardly check. I'll distract them at the front." Daniel fixed him with a wary gaze, uncertain whether to trust this unknown ally. But time was short, and Bravo needed him. With a curt nod, he agreed and prepared to move into position. He inhaled, steeling himself. The stranger crept toward the barn's front entrance, while Daniel circled around. Under the eaves, he spotted a small door slightly ajar. He slipped inside and found himself in a cramped storage room reeking of gasoline and damp straw. Through a gap in the boards, he could see the main barn floor, lit by a single hanging bulb. Cages were lined up, each containing a dog. Some whimpered, others growled, but all looked terrified. Daniel's heart pounded at the sight. He scanned desperately for Bravo. Then he saw him, a German shepherd with a distinctive scar along his flank, curled in the corner of a cage built from metal bars. Bravo's ears twitched at the commotion, but his eyes held a wary resignation. Daniel forced himself not to rush inside. Abruptly, a harsh voice rang out. "You said we'd have a buyer tonight." Another man's voice replied, dripping with impatience. "We do. That idiot who was snooping around the forest is our perfect bait. Relax." Daniel grit his teeth, realizing they'd planned to lure him here. The tension in his gut coiled tighter. He glanced through the gap again and spotted 2 men with rifles leaning against wooden posts. Their casual manner suggested confidence. One tapped a boot against Bravo's cage, making the dog growl softly. "Feisty mutt," the man remarked, chuckling. Daniel swallowed hard, forcing himself to remain calm. These thugs were armed and ready. He needed an opening to free Bravo and the others. Outside, he heard raised voices, the stranger's distraction in motion. Now was his chance. Moving carefully, Daniel inched from the storage room into the barn. The smell of fear and damp fur choked the air. Step by step, he edged behind a stack of crates, each labeled with foreign markings. A distant shout indicated the guards were briefly distracted. Heart pounding, Daniel unlatched the nearest cage, where a collie stared at him with eyes. The dog darted out, but rather than flee, it cowered close to Daniel's legs. "Shh," he whispered, patting the collie's head. One by one, he opened more cages. Some dogs bolted away, others stayed near him. He had to work fast. In the far corner, Bravo watched warily, ears pricked. Daniel swallowed, pushing down a flood of emotion. "Hang on, boy. "I'm coming," he mouthed, creeping closer along the wall. Suddenly, a board creaked beneath Daniel's boot, and one of the guards whirled around, rifle raised. Daniel ducked behind the crates as bullets splintered wood. The dog scattered, barking. "Intruder!" the guard shouted. Adrenaline surged through Daniel. He fumbled for his knife, knowing his only advantage was the element of surprise. Before the guard could advance, another voice yelled from outside, drawing his attention. Daniel seized the moment, rushing low across the floor toward Bravo's cage. The dog recognized him, ears pivoting forward. "Easy, boy," Daniel murmured, sliding the latch free. The cage door swung open, but Bravo hesitated, as though fighting the of betrayal. A second guard stomped in, cursing. Daniel braced himself, but Bravo sprang first, slamming the man back with a bark. Hope ignited in Daniel's chest. Shots rattled the barn as Bravo pinned the guard, teeth bared. The man coughed, struggling to bring his weapon up, but Bravo pressed him down, growling with an intensity that seemed to echo off the rafters. Daniel, adrenaline surging, scanned the barn for the second guard, aware they had only a window to escape. Freed dogs scattered between bales of hay, fear fueling their frantic dashes. From outside, the stranger's voice rose in alarm, yelling threats that diverted the second guard's focus. Daniel took advantage, lunging toward Bravo's cage and hooking his arm around the pinned guard's rifle, kicking it away. The guard spat in frustration, but Bravo's presence froze him in place. Over the cacophony of barking animals, Daniel motioned for Bravo to follow. "Let's get out," he hissed. Bravo backed off the guard but kept him pinned with a glare. With composure, Daniel yanked a length of rope from a nearby table and quickly tied the man's wrists, ignoring his curses. Then he shoved aside a broken plank, clearing a path toward the main exit. A volley of gunfire from outside jolted every nerve in Daniel's body. He flinched, worry stabbing his gut at the thought of more armed accomplices. Bravo, undaunted, trotted by his side, scanning for threats with that old soldier's awareness Daniel remembered so well. Pride brightened Daniel's chest, even in this chaos. The bond they'd forged in Adamar might still burn strong. Gathering his courage, Daniel poked his head out the barn door. Darkness cloaked the clearing, but figures moved in restless, shadowy silhouettes. He spotted the stranger who had guided him here, ducking behind an old pickup truck while exchanging gunfire with two men. Flashes lit the scene in bursts, revealing the sharp lines of their grim faces. Another dog dashed across the clearing, ears flat, then vanished among the trees. Daniel's heart skipped. He had to get Bravo and the other dogs out safely. Summoning the last of his nerve, he signaled for Bravo to stay close. Together they slipped around the barn's side, hugging the shadows. The night air tasted of gunpowder and damp earth. Gravel crunched as the men advanced, shouting curses about stolen cargo. Daniel recognized that tone, men who valued profit above all else. He silently vowed they wouldn't profit from Bravo's life. He inched toward the pickup, mind racing. In a sudden motion, the stranger fired twice, forcing the smugglers to duck. "Go!" he yelled, voice ragged. Daniel broke into a run, ignoring the flare of pain in his leg. Bravo sprinted beside him, harnessing that old discipline as if they'd never been parted. A bullet whizzed past, hitting the barn's exterior with a splintering crack. Panting, Daniel scanned for an exit route. Through swirling dust, he spotted a battered gate leading to a gravel road. If they could slip past the gunmen, they might escape with the freed dogs. But the men regrouped, rifles raised, stepping into his path. Swallowing dread, Daniel pressed forward. Bravo bared his teeth in a warning snarl. The air smelled of rain and adrenaline, stirring up fierce memories of Adamar's war-torn alleys again. One of the armed men fired a warning shot into the ground. "Get away from those dogs," he barked, stepping closer. Daniel held his breath, scanning the darkness for the stranger. Had the man fled? If so, Daniel was outnumbered. The thunderclouds above finally unleashed a very cold drizzle. adding tension to the confrontation. Bravo let out a menacing growl. That slight intimidation made the smuggler's grip falter a fraction. With a sudden burst of will, Daniel feinted left, then dove forward, knocking the rifle aside. The gun discharged into the night but missed its mark. Bravo lunged, snapping at the smuggler's jacket, forcing him to backpedal. The second smuggler took aim, rage twisting his features. Daniel's heart lurched. This was too close. Any wrong move could cost Bravo his life. Just then, headlights sliced through the trees, illuminating the chaos. A battered truck screeched to a halt, and the stranger leaped from the driver's side, firing into the air. The smugglers whirled, caught between two threats. Daniel seized the moment. He grabbed the second smuggler's weapon barrel, forcing it upward. A deafening shot rang out, burning the night with muzzle flash. The bullet tore through the barn roof, scattering splinters. Bravo lunged again, clamping down on the man's forearm. A howl of pain erupted. Daniel wrested the gun free, tossing it aside. The stranger charged in to help, face set with grim determination. Rain pelted the ground harder now, thunder reverberating overhead. With coordinated effort, they forced the smugglers back toward the truck's blazing headlights. Every heartbeat felt impossibly loud. Suddenly, a third figure emerged from behind the truck, aiming a pistol at Daniel. He barely had time to react before the stranger, his unexpected ally, threw himself in the line of fire. The shot cracked through the storm-lashed air, and the stranger staggered. Daniel's eyes flared with shock as the man collapsed to one knee. Fury churned inside him, recalling lost comrades in Adamar. He darted forward, grappling with the gunman's wrist. A violent struggle ensued, boots sliding on slick mud. Bravo, sensing the danger, leaped onto the attacker's back, forcing the pistol downward. It discharged a second time with a sharp flash, but the bullet dug harmlessly into the gravel. The man shrieked, buckling under the dog's weight. Thunder rumbled overhead like nature's own wrath unleashed. Lightning illuminated their struggle. Ripping the pistol from the gunman's grasp, Daniel hurled it into the darkness. A savage cough tore from the wounded stranger, who slumped against the truck's side. The remaining smugglers, cornered and disarmed, glared through the driving rain. Bravo hovered near Daniel, muzzle flecked with mud and tension. For a moment, the storm's fury matched the rage in that clearing. Daniel glanced at the stranger, guilt gnawing his insides. The man had risked everything to help, and now he was shot. Meanwhile, the freed dogs formed a circle of trembling bodies around the barn entrance, uncertain whether to flee or stay. Daniel's chest tightened with responsibility. The men who orchestrated this cruelty stood subdued, yet the night still crackled with danger. He knew it wasn't over until they were safe. Sirens pierced the downpour, a sharp wail cutting through the hammering rain. Someone must have called the authorities, or maybe a nearby resident heard the gunshots. Relief mingled with anxiety. Would they see Daniel as a trespasser or a rescuer? He wiped rain from his eyes, nodding to Bravo. The dog pressed closer, as though guarding him against any threat. In minutes, squad cars skidded into the clearing, red and blue lights spinning across puddles. Officers fanned out, weapons drawn. Daniel raised his hands, heart thudding. Then he motioned to the caged dogs and the wounded stranger, struggling to show them the full picture. "They were trafficking the dogs," he said, voice rough. "We just saved them." An officer approached, stance cautious but respectful, scanning the battered scene. Daniel's limbs quivered. Within minutes, paramedics tended to the wounded stranger, who winced but tried to wave them off. One by one, the smugglers were handcuffed, some cursing, others silent with defeat etched on their faces. The rescued dogs circled nervously, uncertain of the new arrivals. An animal control unit was called to handle them gently. Amid the swirl of flashing lights and official voices, Daniel finally sank to his knees beside Bravo, resting a trembling hand on the dog's neck. In that moment, the chaos faded, replaced by a profound sense of relief. They had survived again, just as they once did in Adamar. Bravo pressed his muzzle against Daniel's shoulder, a gesture of quiet reunion. Tears slipped unbidden from Daniel's eyes. "You're safe," he whispered. "We're both safe now." Thunder rumbled. The paramedics loaded the wounded stranger onto a stretcher, his brow furrowed in pain. Despite the bullet grazing his shoulder, he kept insisting it was just a scratch and gestured for the EMTs to check on the dogs first. In the swirl of urgent voices, Daniel stood guard beside Bravo, letting the dog steady himself after the ordeal. A kind-eyed police sergeant approached, light reflecting off the badge pinned to his jacket. He introduced himself as Sergeant Bailey, then asked Daniel to recount what happened. Even with the rain tapering off, the clearing still glistened with puddles, each ripple illuminated by rotating police lights. Daniel explained how he'd come for his lost military dog, describing Bravo's disappearance overseas and the rumors that led him to Greenfield. He detailed the tip from the stable, the group trafficking the dogs, and the frantic rescue that nearly got them all killed. Sergeant Bailey scribbled notes, occasionally glancing at the disarmed smugglers slumped by a cruiser, wrists bound in plastic restraints. "You took a big risk," the sergeant said gravely, closing his notepad. "But you saved a lot of animals tonight. We've seen signs of illegal activity in these woods, missing pets, sightings of strange vehicles, but never had solid proof until now." Nearby, an officer and a member of animal control coaxed the trembling dogs into a makeshift pen, offering blankets and soft words. Bravo watched them warily, as if unsure whether to accept this sudden wave of human kindness. Daniel stooped to rub Bravo's flank, careful around the old scar. "It's okay," he whispered, voice husky with lingering emotion. "They're here to help." Bravo turned his head, eyes meeting Daniel's, and for a moment, the swirling memories of war dissolved. They were partners again, though battered by time, still bound by something no chaos could sever. One of the paramedics approached Daniel, pointing to the small gash on his forearm. "Sir, let me clean that for you. Looks like a bullet fragment or shrapnel." Only then did Daniel notice the sting along his skin. He nodded absently, letting her disinfect and bandage it. All around him, the night's tension slowly ebbed into the aftermath of sirens and paperwork. The wounded stranger, now calmer, offered Daniel a faint smile from the ambulance gurney. "I'm Will," he said quietly. "Didn't mean to drag you into all this, but I couldn't stand by once I learned their plans." Daniel nodded, gratitude mingling with respect. "You saved our lives," he said. "That bullet was meant for me." Will brushed off the praise, though color tinged his cheeks. "I saw that dog with you, recognized the bond. Figured if anyone could shut this ring down, it'd be someone who actually cares. I just hope you can look after Bravo now." Daniel swallowed hard, mind flicking back to the war-torn streets where Bravo had risked everything to protect him. "I promise," he managed, "I won't lose him again." Sergeant Bailey reappeared, this time guiding the smugglers to a police van. He tossed Daniel a business card. "We'll need an official statement at the station tomorrow," he said. "Bring any documents you have, service records or ownership papers. If you need lodging for the dog, we can call the local shelter." But Daniel shook his head. "No, Bravo stays with me." The sergeant gave a short nod of understanding, eyes drifting to Bravo's watchful stance. "Of course, just be careful. He's been through a lot." In the aftermath, the police set up floodlights around the barn, scouring it for evidence. Will was driven off to the hospital in an ambulance, wincing but flashing Daniel a determined thumbs up. The other freed dogs, some limping, were gently coaxed into the animal control van. Daniel approached the officer in charge of them, quietly asking, "Where will they go?" The woman, wearing a green jacket embroidered with the county's seal, gave a reassuring smile. "They'll be checked at the local vet clinic, given food and shelter. We'll try to reunite them with any owners or find safe fosters." Daniel crouched, letting a small terrier sniff his hand. "Thank you," he murmured, though the weight in his voice hinted at so much more. Part of him wished he could adopt them all, but he knew reuniting with Bravo would take all his focus. Finally, with dawn approaching, the officers left the scene. Rain clouds scattered, revealing a pale strip of horizon. Daniel, exhausted to his bones, gently coaxed Bravo into the passenger seat of his truck. The dog resisted at first, still skittish, but a calming stroke along his shoulders and a quiet command in that old, familiar tone eased him in. As soon as Bravo settled, Daniel felt an odd swirl of relief and sorrow. So many years had passed, but here they were, side by side once again. Daniel slid behind the wheel, turned the key, and guided them back toward Greenfield, headlights slicing through the pre-dawn gloom. Back at the inn, the elderly proprietor nearly dropped her coffee pot when she saw Daniel hobble in with a large German shepherd. "My word," she exclaimed, eyes wide. "Is this your dog, the one you spoke of?" Daniel nodded, hands shaking slightly from fatigue. "Yeah, we found each other." She set down the pot gently. "I'll get you both towels. You're soaked." She hurried off, returning with an armful of dry cloths. Bravo eyed her with cautious interest, ears flicking at the faint smell of cinnamon and soap. Daniel patted Bravo's head. "We're safe," he said softly, as if reassuring them both. In his room, Daniel collapsed onto the edge of the bed, gingerly removing his mud-caked boots. Bravo paced, sniffing corners as though trying to gauge if the space was secure. The dog's fur was still damp, so Daniel toweled him off with careful strokes. He saw fresh scrapes and old scars, evidence of hardships Bravo must have endured on his own. A lump rose in Daniel's throat. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I never meant to leave you behind." Bravo's ears flicked at the sound of Daniel's voice. Slowly, the dog padded over and rested his chin on Daniel's knee. An electric hush filled the air as Daniel gently ran his fingers along Bravo's face, feeling the coarse hair and the subtle ridge of bone beneath. Finally, the moment broke when Bravo let out a quiet sigh, as though relenting to the idea that this human at least might be trustworthy. Outside, the sun crept over the rooftops, bathing Greenfield in gentle light. Exhaustion conquered Daniel, and he lay back, one arm draped over his brow. Bravo, settling at the foot of the bed, kept a silent vigil. In half-sleep, Daniel's dreams flickered with images of Adamar, where mortar shells rocked the earth and Bravo darted between blasts, unflinching. But now those nightmares eased with the knowledge that Bravo was here, alive and no longer alone. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a fragile sense of peace. A knock at the door startled them both awake some hours later. Daniel rose, stiff from his battered body's protest, and cracked the door open to reveal Sergeant Bailey. He wore plain clothes now, but carried the same air of calm authority. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. Daniel stepped aside, glancing briefly at Bravo, who stood at attention, tail low but not tucked. The sergeant offered a gentle smile. "Looks like he's already found his spot." Daniel returned the faintest grin. "Yeah, he has." Bailey cleared his throat. "You probably need rest, but I wanted to follow up. Will's stable at the hospital. The men we arrested are being questioned. The one Bravo took down is in custody as well. I'd guess they'll be facing multiple charges." Daniel breathed relief. "And the dogs?" "Being well cared for," Bailey confirmed. "You did good last night, Stone. You saved them." A rueful note entered his voice. "We've suspected a smuggling network for a while. This is our first big break." Daniel's gaze dropped to Bravo. "Glad we could help. But what about Bravo's status? The war ended years ago. I was his handler, but I don't know where that leaves us legally." Bailey shrugged. "If you've got proof he served, the process of readopting might be straightforward. We can expedite it, especially given the circumstances." The sergeant eyed the dog. "He's a hero from what I hear. So are you, for that matter." Heat rose to Daniel's face and he brushed off the compliment. "Just did what needed doing." Bailey nodded, handing over a small envelope. "Here's my card and some contacts in the county. Vets, shelters, the precinct's admin. Keep me updated if you need anything." He turned to leave but paused, casting one final glance at Bravo. "You be good for him here?" he teased gently. Bravo tilted his head, tail giving a cautious thump. The sergeant chuckled and left. Silence reclaimed the room. Daniel folded the envelope into his jacket pocket and sank onto the bed. Bravo approached, muzzle nudging Daniel's hand as if recognizing that life had taken a drastic turn for both of them. "We'll figure it all out," Daniel promised, "one day at a time." Late the next morning, Daniel found himself in the small lobby of Greenfield's only veterinary clinic. An overhead fan hummed softly, stirring the antiseptic scent of dog shampoo and disinfectant. Bravo sat at his side, ears alert but posture wary, as though he half expected something unpleasant to happen. A few plastic chairs lined the walls, each occupied by a nervous pet owner holding a cat carrier or a leash. Daniel noted how Bravo's presence drew curious glances. A couple of people whispered, impressed by the dog's disciplined bearing. A receptionist in lavender scrubs approached with a clipboard. "Mr. Stone? The vet can see Bravo now." Daniel rose, giving Bravo a reassuring pat. This was their first official checkup since the rescue. Overnight, Daniel had realized how neglected Bravo's medical needs might be. If he wanted to adopt him legally, Bravo needed a clean bill of health, plus any missing vaccinations. Quietly, Daniel followed the receptionist down a short hallway to an exam room with sky-blue walls. Inside, a veterinarian named Dr. Thompson waited, her demeanor calm yet thorough, as she greeted them. "Let's see how your friend is doing," Dr. Thompson said. She stooped to Bravo's eye level, letting him sniff her hand. Though still tense, Bravo allowed a gentle pat on the flank. "You said he's a retired military dog?" she asked, glancing at Daniel. "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "He's been on his own for some time. Just got him back last night." He swallowed against the memory of the gunfight and the sight of Bravo in a cage. Dr. Thompson nodded sympathetically, then began a routine check. Eyes, ears, heartbeat, temperature. Bravo stood rigid, glancing at Daniel as if to ask whether this was part of the mission. Daniel murmured soft words, praising him for staying calm. Finding no major injuries beyond the old scar, Dr. Thompson set aside her stethoscope. "He's a little underweight, but surprisingly healthy for a dog living rough. I'll run a blood panel to check for parasites, and he'll need a booster on certain vaccines." She paused, then smiled. "Despite everything, he's clearly well-trained and well-bonded to you." Daniel's chest tightened with unexpected gratitude. "Thank you," he said, relieved that Bravo didn't appear to suffer deeper wounds. Dr. Thompson printed out forms for the necessary shots, explaining the adoption process. Once she stepped out to retrieve vaccines, Daniel stroked Bravo's fur. The dog's eyes flicked up, and Daniel felt a pang. There was still a wall of caution in that gaze. But there were also moments of recognition, moments that reminded Daniel of the old Bravo who used to curl at his feet in Adamar, safe between missions. They finished the exam quickly. Shots administered, a plan for follow-up set. Outside the clinic, Sergeant Bailey was waiting near a police SUV, flipping through a notepad. He spotted Daniel and Bravo and approached. "Figured I'd catch you here," he said, half smiling. "Wanted to let you know we've identified the ringleader behind last night's raid. Some guy named Morales. Been on our radar for cross-border smuggling." The sergeant eyed Bravo. Seems the dogfighting angle might have been part of it too. Daniel felt heat rise in his cheeks. The notion that Bravo could have been forced to fight for someone's profit infuriated him. "Is there anything I can do to help the case?" he asked. Bailey nodded. Testimony, for starters. I'm heading to the station in an hour. If you're up for it, you can file an official statement. Daniel glanced at Bravo. He had hoped to let the dog rest, but the police needed his account. All right, he agreed softly. We'll come by. Before heading to the station, Daniel stopped at the inn, hoping to leave Bravo in a peaceful spot. When the innkeeper saw them return, she laid out a bowl of fresh water for Bravo, remarking how he looks more at ease now. Daniel noticed Bravo's posture had indeed relaxed a fraction, tail swaying gently when someone greeted him. Maybe, Daniel thought with cautious optimism, Bravo sensed that this was a place where no one would harm him. Once Bravo was settled in Daniel's room, Daniel called the front desk. If he gets anxious, please let me know, he told the innkeeper. He shouldn't cause trouble, but he's been through a lot. The woman gave a sympathetic nod. We'll keep an eye out, dear. Go handle your business. At the police station, a modest brick building with a single flagpole out front, Sergeant Bailey met Daniel in the lobby. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered faintly as they walked down a corridor lined with wanted posters and public safety bulletins. In a small interview room, the sergeant set a digital recorder on the table. Just tell me everything that happened, he said, leaning back in a squeaky chair. So Daniel began, recounting the search for Bravo, the tip from Will at the stable, and the ensuing firefight. He included every detail, the smugglers, the dogs, the final confrontation under the storm. With each sentence, he felt tension returning, his mind flicking back to that moment of lunging between cages, the crash of thunder overhead. When he finished, Bailey switched off the recorder. That lines up with what we've heard from Will. He's cooperating with our investigation now that he's stable at the hospital. The DA believes this will be enough to press formal charges against all parties involved. Bailey extended a form. Here's a statement of evidence. Sign at the bottom. Daniel scribbled his name, exhausted from reliving the ordeal. Thanks, he muttered. Do you think they'll do real time? Bailey shrugged. Depends on the judge, but dog trafficking isn't taken lightly these days. Plus, they assaulted you and shot Will. That alone will keep them locked up for a while. He paused, studying Daniel's worn face. You did good, Stone. I know it doesn't erase the past, but you've given those animals a shot at a better life. Especially Bravo. Stepping out of the station, Daniel breathed in the afternoon air. The interview had dragged on, leaving him drained. His first instinct was to return to the inn, see how Bravo was doing. Yet a memory nudged him. Willow Creek Farm. He had promised to let Farmer Lawson know what happened once the dog was found. So, with a quick phone call, Daniel arranged a taxi and headed toward the farm, hoping to tie up loose ends. When he arrived, he found Lawson mending a fence under the sun's intense glare. The old farmer glanced up, wiping sweat from his brow. Heard there was trouble last night, he said, voice low. Daniel confirmed it with a nod, explaining how they'd dismantled the smuggling ring. Lawson grunted approval. Reckon the critters will rest easier now. He jammed a post into the ground with surprising vigor for his age. Your dog's all right, I take it? A small smile tugged at Daniel's mouth. He's at the inn, recovering. For a moment he hesitated. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. If you hadn't told me about the sightings, I might never have found him. The farmer waved off the thanks. All I did was complain about a stray spooking my sheep. You did the real work. Then after a pause, he added, You and that dog share a bond. Could tell when I saw how you asked about him. Don't let that slip away. Daniel nodded, swallowing a sudden tightness in his throat. He realized that people around here, despite their gruff exteriors, understood the deeper ties of loyalty. Maybe because they lived closer to the land, closer to the simple truths of caring for what's theirs. No fancy speeches were needed, just action. By the time he returned to the inn, the sun had begun its lazy descent, warm light mellowing to gold across Greenfield's rooftops. His leg ached, so he limped more noticeably. At the reception desk, the innkeeper told him Bravo had remained calm, only perking up whenever footsteps approached the door. "He's waiting for you," she said with a kind smile. Daniel ascended the old wooden stairs, each creak echoing in the quiet hallway. The moment he opened his room, Bravo lifted his head from where he lay near the bed. The dog's ears flicked forward, a clear sign of recognition. Daniel's face softened. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, stepping inside. He placed a small bag on the nightstand, supplies from the vet, and rummaged for Bravo's new dog bowl, which he set down with fresh water. Bravo rose, stretching, and wandered over. The dog drank carefully, then turned his attention back to Daniel, tail swishing slowly. That subtle wag felt like a truce. Daniel lowered himself onto the floor, ignoring the protest in his knee. He held out a hand, palm up, recalling the early days of their training. "Remember me?" he asked softly. Bravo stared, then pressed his nose against Daniel's palm. The ghost of their old friendship whispered through that quiet contact, stirring memories of nights around a desert camp, Bravo resting his muzzle on Daniel's thigh. "I thought I'd never see you again," Daniel admitted. "So many regrets kept me up at night. I blame myself for letting you out of my sight." Bravo merely blinked, as though the past was too distant to hold on to. The dog's acceptance, or at least his lack of condemnation, made a knot of guilt unwind in Daniel's chest. They couldn't change what happened, but maybe they could shape what lay ahead. Carefully, Daniel pulled out a photograph from his pocket, a dog tag with Bravo's old ID number attached to a faded snapshot of them both in uniform, taken before shipping out to Adamar. "I kept this all these years," he said, "hoping one day I'd show it to you again. Silly, right?" Bravo sniffed at the item, then returned his gaze to Daniel. The dog's eyes held something gentle, something Daniel dared interpret as familiarity. He exhaled, resting his back against the bed. Outside, the sky dimmed, painting the walls with dusky shadows. "We'll get you officially adopted soon," Daniel promised in a hush. "Then maybe we can move on from all of it, together." Bravo settled by Daniel's side, tail softly wagging. For the first time, Daniel felt the crushing weight of loss lessen. In that silent companionship, with the last rays of sun fading, it seemed they had both come home. Over the next 2 days, Daniel took Bravo outside for short walks around Greenfield, letting the dog reacquaint himself with mundane sights and sounds. The once nervous townsfolk, who had only heard rumors of an aggressive stray, soon discovered how calm and disciplined Bravo was under Daniel's gentle guidance. At the local cafe, people offered dog biscuits and warm smiles, though Bravo still maintained a reserved distance. Daniel noticed that the dog perked up at certain noises, a truck's backfiring engine, a passing ambulance siren, reminders of the environment where they'd once risked their lives. After each small spook, Daniel crouched down, praising him softly until Bravo's tension eased. Meanwhile, Will remained in the hospital under observation for the gunshot wound to his shoulder. Sergeant Bailey informed Daniel that Will was expected to recover fully given time. The man's cooperation helped the ongoing investigation into the smuggling ring, and the authorities discovered more than just illegal dog trading might be at play. Rumors of stolen farm equipment and suspicious wire transfers circulated among the towns nearby. Bailey requested that Daniel keep in touch, especially if Bravo's presence uncovered additional leads. On a breezy afternoon, Daniel headed for a quiet clearing beyond Willow Creek Farm where the ground dipped into a secluded pond. He brought a tennis ball, hoping to coax Bravo into a bit of play. For so many months, the dog had lived in survival mode. Now Daniel wanted to remind him that life could hold simpler joys. He made sure his limp wouldn't slow him too badly, then waved the ball. "Want to try?" he asked, tossing it gently into the water's edge. Bravo watched, ears perked, but didn't charge after it. Instead, he padded to the waterline, sniffed the shallows, and cast a doubtful look back. "It's all right," Daniel encouraged, kneeling in the grass. He remembered their old training sessions, how Bravo had once leaped into rivers to retrieve objects, unstoppable in his focus. War changed them both, Daniel thought. Now they had to rediscover who they were. After a moment, Bravo plunged a paw into the water, stirring ripples that caught the sunlight. Then, with cautious determination, he waded in far enough to grab the ball. Returning to Daniel, he placed it at his feet. The dog's tail gave a faint wag, as though a small spark of that old enthusiasm flickered beneath the surface. "Good boy," Daniel praised, stroking Bravo's back. "We'll do it again soon, all right?" He tossed the ball a second time, and Bravo repeated the procedure, slightly less hesitant. Each retrieval felt like a victory, forging a path back to the trust they once shared. By the third toss, Bravo actually trotted faster, water spraying from his paws. Daniel's eyes stung with unshed tears at that sign of progress. A sudden rumble of an approaching vehicle made them both look up. Farmer Lawson's dusty pickup rolled over the crest of the dirt road and stopped nearby. Lawson stepped out, tipping his hat. "Didn't mean to interrupt," he said. "Just checking fences after that storm." He noticed Bravo, drenched and panting, and gave a rare smile. "He looks happier." Daniel nodded. "We're taking it day by day." Lawson jerked his chin at the dog. "You know, I used to serve in the Army years before you likely signed up. Saw how important them canine units were. Glad to see him back with you." Surprised, Daniel found himself asking more about Lawson's service. The old farmer spoke in clipped phrases about border deployments and night patrols, times when a good dog could mean the difference between life and death. They shared a comfortable silence as they watched Bravo circle the pond, sniffing weeds. Finally, Lawson nodded once more. "Well, you two are welcome to roam my land any time. Keeps the coyotes away, I figure." "Thank you," Daniel said sincerely, watching as Lawson drove off. He turned back to Bravo, who was investigating a patch of reeds. Another day, another small step forward, Daniel thought, determined not to let guilt overshadow what they had now. That evening, Daniel and Bravo returned to the inn. After a modest dinner in his room, Daniel settled onto the bed, flipping through paperwork Dr. Thompson had given him about Bravo's future checkups. The dog had hopped onto an old rug near the window, gazing at the setting sun. Daniel let the hush between them linger until he realized a new worry gnawed at his thoughts. Where would they go once all these formalities were done? Re-enlistment wasn't an option. Daniel's war-torn knee wouldn't pass the requirements. He had no permanent address besides a dusty storage unit back in his hometown. Maybe Greenfield itself could be a home. The people were kind, the pace peaceful. Or perhaps Daniel could find a farm of his own. He closed his eyes, imagining early mornings in a place like Willow Creek, with Bravo dozing on the porch. But that dream felt distant, overshadowed by the practicalities of finances and old scars. A knock sounded at the door. The innkeeper popped her head in, wearing a gentle smile. "Letter for you," she said, handing him a standard envelope. Daniel thanked her and tore it open once she left. His heart thumped at the first sentence. "We regret to inform you of changes in your military canine adoption eligibility." Confusion tangled in Daniel's mind as he scanned the lines. Something about incomplete discharge paperwork, plus uncertainty regarding Bravo's official retirement status. He read a phrase about re-examination, possible reclamation by the armed forces. The words sent a chill through him. Could they take Bravo away after all he'd endured, all they'd fought for? Setting the letter down, Daniel rubbed his forehead. a headache threatening. He recalled Bailey's reassurance that readoption would be straightforward, but the letter indicated complications. If Bravo wasn't fully decommissioned as a military asset, there might be red tape forcing him back into service or into another program. The notion twisted Daniel's stomach. After everything Bravo had suffered, he deserved peace, not more uncertainty. The next morning, Daniel decided to pay an unannounced visit to the county registrar's office, hoping to unravel the bureaucratic tangle. The building was a squat tan structure near the courthouse, with lines of residents seeking various permits. Bravo waited patiently in the truck's cab, the windows cracked for fresh air. Inside, Daniel navigated a maze of counters until he found a clerk who specialized in veterans affairs. A tired-looking woman in reading glasses scanned his documents, occasionally clicking her tongue. "This is unusual," she said, tapping a finger on the letter. "Your dog should have been discharged along with you, or at least given a clear assignment. Here it says he was missing in action, unaccounted for. Then found stateside, but with no updated status." She typed rapidly on her computer. "I'm not seeing an official microchip registration after you parted ways." A helpless anger threatened to bubble up in Daniel. He was lost in the chaos of the pullout. "We only just reunited." The clerk adjusted her glasses. "I understand, sir. But to finalize adoption, we'll need the relevant unit commander's sign-off or a revised discharge record. Otherwise, Bravo is technically government property." The phrase government property made Daniel's blood run hot. Bravo was more than that. He was a partner, a living, loyal being. Struggling to keep his voice calm, Daniel asked, "How do I get that sign-off?" She peered at her computer. "It seems your old unit was disbanded. We may need approval from a higher-level operations desk or the Department of Defense directly. Could take weeks or months." Outside, Daniel slumped behind the wheel, heart heavy. Bravo, sensing his mood, poked his muzzle between the seats, offering silent comfort. Daniel stroked the dog's ears. "They can't do this," he muttered. "We fought side by side. I won't let them uproot you again." He set his jaw, mind churning with the plan to push back. Over the following days, Daniel made phone calls to old contacts, rummaged through his battered footlocker for any official papers that might expedite the process. He discovered a single tattered letter from his former commanding officer, praising Bravo's valor during a mission. Maybe that would help. Meanwhile, Dr. Thompson and Sergeant Bailey wrote statements attesting to Bravo's status in the rescue operation. But the bureaucracy ground on slowly, leaving Daniel with a sense of dread. Still, Greenfield offered small respites from the worry. Each morning, Daniel and Bravo strolled through the quiet streets, greeting neighbors who now recognized the pair. Sometimes they ventured back to Willow Creek Farm or the clearing beyond, where Bravo refined his retrieval skills. Every wag of his tail, every relaxed moment in the water, reminded Daniel that progress could be found in gentle daily steps. Yet as dusk fell on another week, Daniel returned to the inn to find a thin official envelope slipped under his door. Heart pounding, he tore it open, scanning the contents. This time, the tone was more urgent. "Pursuant to Regulation 9C-13 for government-owned canine assets, Bravo remains under evaluation for reactivation. You are requested to present the dog at Fort Marshall within 30 days for assessment." Daniel stared at the paper, a hollow ache blooming in his chest. They wanted Bravo brought to a military base for inspection, as though he were nothing but hardware that might still be useful. He crumpled the letter in his fist, hot anger surging through his veins. Taking a shaky breath, he forced himself calm. He vowed they would have to pry Bravo from his hands. If the system demanded a fight, he was ready. Bravo watched him from across the room, tail still, eyes unwavering. Daniel kneeled, pressing his forehead to the dog's. "We're not going backward," he whispered. "I promise. I won't lose you again." Daniel spent that night in a restless swirl of thoughts, pacing his small room while Bravo followed him with worried eyes. Whenever Daniel sank onto the edge of the bed to reread the letter demanding their appearance at Fort Marshall, he felt the dog nudge his hand, as if offering silent reassurance. Yet every glance at the official wording fueled Daniel's frustration. He had faced bullets, mines, and mortar fire, but nothing felt as insidious as a bureaucratic machine threatening to tear them apart. By midnight, he resolved to fight back with every resource available. The next morning, he phoned Sergeant Bailey to explain the situation. Bailey sighed into the line. "I've heard of cases like this before, Stone. When a K-9 goes missing in action, the chain of custody can become complicated. Then reactivation is treated like they're retrieving lost government property." Daniel exhaled sharply, gripping the phone. "So what do I do? Let them claim he's still usable and vanish with him for another tour?" Bailey's voice softened. "I know that's the last thing you want. Let's see if we can gather official endorsements to keep Bravo retired." Daniel decided to contact Dr. Thompson and asked for a letter confirming Bravo's physical and psychological needs. The veterinarian agreed at once, citing the signs of stress that could worsen if the dog was thrust back into a high-intensity environment. She also emphasized Bravo's age and injuries, factors that should weigh heavily against any forced return to duty. Encouraged by her quick support, Daniel then drove to the local library to research any legal precedents. The librarian, a gray-haired woman named Ellen, recognized him and Bravo from around town. She helped Daniel navigate online databases, rummaging through old newspapers and law records for any similar stories. Amid the quiet hum of computers and the rustle of turning pages, Daniel learned of veterans who had successfully fought to adopt their K-9 partners, but also discovered cases where the dogs were reclaimed if no official discharge had been issued. The thought of Bravo crammed back into a transport plane or a training facility made Daniel's chest tighten. He thanked Ellen for her help, and she offered to keep an eye out for additional references. Bravo waited patiently near the entrance, ignoring the curious stares of patrons unused to seeing a large German shepherd in a library. That afternoon, Daniel decided to update Will at the hospital, hoping the man's testimony could help. He found Will sitting upright in a crisp white bed, arm in a sling, flipping channels on a tiny TV. The stranger's face brightened upon spotting Daniel. "Heard you brought down a whole ring of criminals," Will teased, voice still raspy from painkillers. "Guess that means no more hidden barns full of stolen dogs." Daniel grimaced. "We made progress, but the fight's not over. Bravo and I have to deal with military red tape." He explained the letter's demands, feeling his frustration boil again. Will's gaze hardened. "That dog saved my life. If they dare try to force him back into service, I'll vouch for how traumatized he is. Let me know if a statement from me helps." Grateful, Daniel passed him the contact details for the Department of Defense office. "I'll try anything," he said, swallowing the lump of anger. "He's earned his peace." Will gave him a firm handshake. "Then we'll make sure he gets it." On his way out, Daniel noticed a cluster of rescued dogs in the hospital's therapy courtyard, some from the barn operation now being socialized with help from local volunteers. The sight touched him deeply. He couldn't help but think, if Bravo had stayed captive just a little longer, would he be among them, lost and scared? Driving back to the inn, he contemplated one final avenue, the media. Daniel wasn't fond of publicity, but he remembered hearing about cases where public outcry stopped the government from reclaiming a retired K-9. A swirl of conflicting emotions gripped him. Exposing Bravo's story might keep the dog safe, but it also meant revisiting details of the war. That night, he couldn't sleep. Bravo sensed the tension, nudging Daniel's hand every so often to break his worried trance. Morning arrived with gray clouds, threatening rain. Daniel steeled himself and made a call to the local newspaper, The Greenfield Tribune. A journalist named Marcia picked up, her voice polite but cautious. "We don't often run national pieces," she said, "but I heard about the dog trafficking bust. If there's more to the story, I'm listening." Daniel mustered his courage and outlined the dilemma. How Bravo had served overseas, then gone missing in action, only to resurface in Greenfield as a stray, now threatened by a regulation that could yank him back into uniform. Marcia grew silent for a moment. "That's quite a story. Let's schedule an interview. Maybe the public has a right to know." They set a meeting in the park behind the old post office. Rain spattered lightly as Daniel and Bravo arrived. Marcia waited under a gazebo, clutching a notepad and wearing a weatherproof jacket. Her photographer, a lean man in a baseball cap, fiddled with a camera. Bravo stayed close to Daniel's side, scanning the empty paths. Trees swayed overhead, leaves dripping in the cold drizzle. Marcia greeted them warmly, then motioned for Daniel to share his tale. He told her everything: Adamar's dusty streets, the mortar attack, the endless search, the heartbreak of finding Bravo locked in a smuggler's cage. Finally, he described the letter summoning them to Fort Marshall. "People will want to know why you're fighting so hard," Marcia prompted softly. Daniel glanced down at Bravo, remembering desert nights where the dog stood guard as Daniel slept. "Because he's family," Daniel said, voice thick. "He's not property. He's sacrificed for this country, and I won't let them throw him back into the grinder." The photographer snapped pictures while Bravo perked his ears, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The interview concluded with Marcia promising to run the story as soon as possible. She believed it would resonate locally, especially given Bravo's role in dismantling the smuggling ring. Daniel left the park unsure whether to feel hopeful or anxious. Media attention could backfire, drawing critics or fueling bureaucrats determined to reassert control. Still, he had little choice. If public outrage was what it took to protect Bravo, he'd endure any scrutiny. That evening, in the inn's small common area, Daniel nursed a cup of black coffee while Bravo dozed at his feet. The innkeeper approached quietly. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the chair across from him. Daniel waved for her to join. She set down a plate of homemade biscuits. "Heard from your sergeant friend that you're fighting to keep Bravo." Daniel nodded glumly, sipping coffee. "It's a battle I didn't expect to face." She clasped her hands.
"Well, if you need references, the folks here know how much you've helped. The way you shut down that ring, those dogs might have died if not for you and Bravo." Her kindness reminded him how different Greenfield was from the chaos of war. "Thank you," Daniel said. "I appreciate all the support." She patted his hand. "This town stands behind you, dear. No soldier and his faithful dog should be separated after what they've been through." Warmth flared in Daniel's chest, momentarily dulling his dread. A couple of days later, the Greenfield Tribune published the front-page article. "Hero dog faces return to service? One veteran's fight for his canine partner." The piece contained quotes from Dr. Thompson about Bravo's fragile emotional state, from Sergeant Bailey on Bravo's role in the smuggling bust, and from Daniel himself, affirming his unwavering commitment to keep the dog safe. Photographs showed Bravo's intelligent gaze and the faint scars marking his body. Before long, residents began approaching Daniel on the street with encouraging words. Some offered to contact their representatives. Others asked how to start petitions. Yet with each passing sunrise, Daniel felt the looming deadline, 30 days, until Fort Marshall expected them. He tried calling the base, hoping to speak with someone sympathetic, but each time he hit a wall of administrative staff repeating the same lines about standard procedure. At night, Daniel found himself staring at Bravo, who slept curled on the floor. He marveled at how the dog could rest so peacefully, while Daniel's mind churned with fears of losing him again,
But in moments when Bravo woke and nosed Daniel's arm, he felt sure that no uniformed official could tear them apart. One afternoon, as the tension built, Dr. Thompson arrived at the inn unexpectedly. She carried a folder and a determined expression. "We're going to do a thorough psychological evaluation," she announced. "I spoke with a canine behaviorist who volunteers at the clinic. If we can demonstrate that returning to service would harm Bravo's well-being, we might have a legal angle." Daniel listened, his heart swelling with cautious gratitude. That could be our best shot. Over the next hours, Bravo underwent various tests, responding to simulated commands and noise distractions. The behaviorist noted how the dog's stress spiked at sudden loud bangs. Consistent with lingering trauma, they compiled pages of observations to strengthen Daniel's case. As the deadline crept closer, news outlets beyond Greenfield began picking up the story. A regional paper ran a follow-up, praising the small town rallying behind a war hero. Social media posts spread, attracting comments from veterans, dog lovers, and supporters nationwide. Cards started arriving at the inn, addressed to Hero Dog Bravo, some with donations enclosed to help cover legal costs. Each envelope reminded Daniel that he wasn't alone in this fight, and in quieter moments, he'd kneel beside Bravo, letting the dog's presence anchor him. If they could endure the battlefield, they could endure this. He only prayed it would be enough. As the 30-day mark drew closer, Daniel felt his anxiety mounting with every sunrise. The Greenfield community rallied around him and Bravo, but the military bureaucracy loomed like a distant thunderhead. Each time he checked the mailbox, a knot formed in his stomach. The veterinarian's letters, the behaviorist's report, Sergeant Bailey's endorsement, he had gathered each piece, yet no reply came from Fort Marshall. It was as though a silent machine quietly advanced, unconcerned by human pleas. Early one morning, a black SUV with government plates rumbled into Greenfield. The vehicle parked outside the county offices, prompting a wave of rumors through town. Some claimed a military officer had arrived. Others insisted it was a lawyer from the Department of Defense. Daniel only learned of it hours later when he stepped out of the inn to walk Bravo and saw two men in suits heading toward the courthouse. Their stiff postures and grim faces gave Daniel a chill. Might they be here about Bravo? Not long after, Daniel's phone buzzed. Sergeant Bailey's number flashed on the screen. Daniel answered with a terse greeting, bracing for bad news. "Stone," Bailey said. "I just got word there's a colonel from the Army's K-9 division in town. They're meeting with local officials about your dog." Daniel exhaled, dread tickling the back of his neck. "So they've come to take him now?" Bailey's tone was guarded. "Not yet. They scheduled a hearing next week at the county courthouse. The colonel wants to review the paperwork in person." A hollow ache gathered in Daniel's chest. I guess that's one last chance to prove Bravo should remain retired. 3 days passed in a blur of phone calls, document reviews, and restless nights. Dr. Thompson and the canine behaviorist prepared to testify about Bravo's condition. Sergeant Bailey promised to present evidence of Bravo's assistance dismantling the smuggling ring. Even Farmer Lawson volunteered a statement about how the dog had protected local livestock instead of harming it. Daniel was grateful, but still uneasy. He knew how the Army could be. A single signature might override them all if the colonel deemed Bravo fit for duty. The morning of the hearing, the sky hung heavy with clouds. Daniel dressed in a simple collared shirt, forgoing his old uniform. Bravo sensed the tension, pacing by the door until Daniel knelt to calm him. "Steady," Daniel murmured, recalling the command they used during missions. Bravo paused, eyes watchful, his scarred flank a silent testament to what they'd survived. Taking a steadying breath, Daniel hooked on the dog's leash and headed for the courthouse. Greenfield's courthouse, though modest, bustled with an unusual crowd that day. Locals gathered on the steps, holding small signs that read, "Bravo belongs here," or "Don't take our hero." Others offered waves or polite nods as Daniel passed, their faces showing cautious hope. Inside, fluorescent lights and worn linoleum floors gave the hallway a somber feel. A bailiff directed Daniel to a courtroom that smelled faintly of old wood polish. Rows of benches were half filled with onlookers, neighbors, fellow veterans, even a few reporters scribbling notes. Bravo stayed close, tail low, uncharacteristically quiet. At the front, a judge in dark robes conferred with two uniformed officers and a stern-faced man in a gray suit. Sergeant Bailey and Dr. Thompson were on the other side, flipping through folders. The bailiff beckoned Daniel forward, and he gently guided Bravo along. The dog's claws clicked softly on the polished floor. Once the judge noticed them, she nodded and motioned for silence. This hearing will address the case of a military working dog, previously designated as Bravo MWD-72, and the contested request for reactivation, the judge began. Her tone was measured, eyes scanning the participants. "We have Colonel Perry representing the Army's K-9 Division and Mr. Daniel Stone petitioning for permanent adoption." The colonel, a square-jawed man in crisp uniform, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, Bravo was never formally retired. He was listed missing in action. Under standard regulations, the Army retains the right to recall or reassign him, pending an evaluation." His voice carried the weight of bureaucracy, unwavering and impersonal. Daniel spoke next, nerves tightening in his throat. "Your Honor, Bravo served honorably with me overseas. He was lost due to circumstances beyond our control. Now that I've found him, I want to ensure he's not returned to a combat environment. He's older, he's injured, and above all, he's earned a peaceful life." The judge nodded. "I understand both positions. Let's hear from the experts." She gestured to Dr. Thompson, who approached the stand. Calmly, the veterinarian explained her assessments. Bravo's high stress reactions to sudden noises, his existing scars, and a mild limp that could worsen under harsh conditions. The canine behaviorist followed, detailing how forced reintroduction to a battlefield environment risked severe psychological trauma. Their words painted a picture of a dutiful soldier dog whose spirit might break if thrust into high-pressure duty again. Colonel Perry countered with official documents referencing Bravo's breed, training, and proven skill set. "The Army invests considerable resources in these dogs, Your Honor. If Bravo's health allows, we'd prefer a thorough evaluation at Fort Marshall. We're open to reassigning him to non-combat roles like detection or therapy demonstrations for younger recruits. We're not aiming to harm him, simply to utilize his training productively." Daniel's anger flared at the notion that Bravo should be used to train younger recruits, as though he were a disposable tool. He steadied his breathing, remembering that outbursts wouldn't help. When the judge asked for final statements, Sergeant Bailey stepped forward. He recounted how Bravo assisted in the smuggling bust, praising the dog's calm under fire, but also attesting to the toll that incident took. "We found him in a cage, battered and fearful. There's no question Bravo's done more than his share. If you ask me, he deserves retirement," Bailey concluded firmly. Finally, the judge turned to Daniel. "Is there anything else you'd like to say?" Silence stretched across the room. Daniel looked down at Bravo, who gazed back with quiet trust. Memories surged, desert missions, patrols at dawn, the mortar blast that tore them apart, and the night they reunited in a swirl of gunshots. Voice tight with emotion, Daniel said, "He's not equipment. He's a living being who served this country as faithfully as any human soldier. If we value that loyalty, we can't break his spirit by sending him back into a life he can't sustain. I'm not denying the Army's investment, but I'm telling you that a dog like Bravo isn't just a resource. He's family, to me and to this community." A hush settled. Even Colonel Perry's expression shifted, if only slightly. The judge folded her hands. I will consider all evidence and statements. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning, when I'll deliver a ruling. A firm rap of the gavel ended the session. People trickled out, some offering Daniel pats on the back or murmured encouragement. The colonel avoided eye contact, gathering his papers with a furrowed brow. Outside, reporters fired questions. Mr. Stone, what if the judge rules against you? Will you comply with an order to surrender Bravo? Daniel, drained, simply shook his head. Let's wait for tomorrow, he said, pushing gently past the throng. Bravo walked beside him, muzzle occasionally brushing Daniel's knee as if sensing his turmoil. That evening, Daniel returned to the inn with Bravo. Townspeople had left small tokens, a bouquet of wildflowers, dog treats, and notes of support, by the door. The innkeeper, her eyes misty, handed Daniel a piece of mail marked with a military seal. His stomach clenched until he realized it was a character reference from his old commanding officer. Inside, a crisp letter praised Bravo's service and recommended an honorable retirement. A wave of gratitude swept through Daniel. Perhaps every small thread of support could tip the scales. He spent the night reading and rereading the note, heart tight with equal parts fear and hope. Bravo lay curled at the foot of the bed, occasionally lifting his head to watch Daniel. If the court ruled in favor of the army, Daniel might have no legal grounds to resist. Yet he knew he wouldn't give up, not after everything they had overcome. Dawn broke with pale light creeping through the curtains. Daniel rose early, taking Bravo for a slow walk around the block. The air felt charged with anticipation. As they neared the courthouse again, locals gathered once more, smaller in number but determined. A tearful woman pressed a Lucky Charm into Daniel's hand, whispering, "That dog deserves better." He thanked her, voice hoarse. Every face seemed to echo the same plea. Let Bravo stay. Inside, the tension felt heavier than the day before. The judge arrived promptly, her black robes rustling as she took her seat. Colonel Perry sat to one side, posture rigid, while Daniel waited with Bravo. At precisely 9 o'clock, the judge called the court to order and cleared her throat. After reviewing all statements, I have prepared a decision regarding MWD 712, also known as Bravo. I ask everyone to remain silent until I finish. At precisely 9 o'clock, the judge called the court to order and cleared her throat, scanning the crowded room for a moment before settling her gaze on Daniel, Bravo, and Colonel Perry. Tension pressed against every corner of the courthouse, and not a single spectator dared to shuffle or cough. Even the colonel's expression, once impassive, betrayed a flicker of unease as the judge began her statement. In reviewing the facts, she said, her voice echoing through the stillness, I have considered Bravo's medical evaluations, behavioral assessments, service record, and the testimony of numerous witnesses. It is clear this dog has a remarkable history, one of valor and dedication in conflict zones. It is also evident he has endured hardships while missing from the Army's official roster, based on the evidence of physical and psychological stress, and in light of the multiple expert opinions that returning him to duty could pose a serious risk to his well-being, I am inclined toward granting him a formal retirement. A wave of whispers swept the room, and Daniel dared to let out a small breath. At his side, Bravo remained poised, though his tail gave a slight wag as if sensing the shift in atmosphere. Colonel Perry, lips pressed together, exchanged a silent glance with the uniformed officer at his side. The judge rapped her gavel gently to restore order. Furthermore, she continued, I find Daniel Stone to be a suitable caretaker for Bravo, given their long-standing bond, the documented training they shared, and the extraordinary efforts Mr. Stone took to locate and protect him. Therefore, I rule that Bravo is to remain in Mr. Stone's custody as a fully retired K-9, no longer subject to reactivation. The Army's official records shall be updated to reflect this outcome. Relief cascaded through Daniel's body, and tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. He stooped, pressing his forehead gently to Bravo's, unable to speak for a moment. Behind them, applause and hushed cheers broke out among the townspeople who had come in support, their signs rattling softly. Even Dr. Thompson allowed herself a wide smile as she closed her folder. The colonel stood, quietly collected his papers, and made his way to the bench. He inclined his head toward the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his tone measured, "I respect the court's decision. We will abide by this ruling and see that the records are appropriately amended." Then he turned to Daniel, extending a curt handshake. "Take good care of him. He's one of the best we ever trained." Daniel nodded, gratitude and lingering resentment swirling inside him. "I will," he replied, voice tight. After that, the colonel exited the courtroom, leaving behind an unspoken acknowledgement of defeat. For Daniel, none of it felt like triumph or conquest, only relief that Bravo would finally have the peace he deserved. Outside, sunshine washed across the courthouse steps, where waiting supporters burst into applause at the sight of Daniel and Bravo emerging victorious. Some cried out congratulations, while others snapped photographs or reached to give Bravo gentle pats. The dog, though startled by the attention, accepted the soft touches with remarkable calm. Daniel scanned the crowd, noticing Will standing by an ambulance, bandaged arm cradled in a sling. The wounded ally grinned from ear to ear, raising his good hand in celebration. Next to him, Farmer Lawson stood with a broad grin, tipping his hat politely. A reporter from the local paper rushed up, microphone in hand. "Mr. Stone, how do you feel?" Daniel rested a hand on Bravo's shoulders and looked down at his loyal partner. "Relieved," he said simply. "This isn't just a victory for me. It's a victory for anyone who believes service dogs deserve compassion after all they've given." The small crowd soon began dispersing, each person returning to daily life, but with the lingering glow of a story that ended in hope instead of heartbreak. Daniel felt a gentle tug at his sleeve. It was Sergeant Bailey, who quietly guided him aside. "I'm proud of you both," Bailey said. "And by the way, the station's always looking for volunteers with experience and training. If you plan on staying around here, let us know." He paused, reading Daniel's expression. "Or if you have other plans, that's fine too." Daniel squinted against the sun, thinking of the future. The army was behind him now. The question was what lay ahead. He glanced at Bravo, whose gaze swept across the crowd before returning to Daniel's face. "I might just stick around," Daniel answered, a small smile forming. "Greenfield feels like home these days." Later, after the bustle died down, Daniel and Bravo strolled to the inn for one last night. The innkeeper greeted them with a tearful laugh, hugging Daniel tightly. "I knew it would work out," she said, offering Bravo a fresh biscuit. Her relief, so genuine, made Daniel's chest fill with warmth. The old anxieties of war and separation felt distant. Bravo ate the biscuit at Daniel's feet, then approached the innkeeper, gently sniffing her apron pockets, hoping for more treats. Up in his room, Daniel stared at his reflection in the small mirror. He looked older than he remembered, lines around his eyes, a slight stoop from his old injury. But the weight in his shoulders had eased, replaced by cautious optimism. Tomorrow, he could move forward without fear of losing Bravo. Perhaps they'd find a house on the outskirts of town. Maybe Daniel would work part-time at the station or volunteer at the veterinary clinic to help train other rescue dogs. The possibilities sparked a kind of excitement he hadn't felt in years. Bravo curled on the bed, muzzle resting on Daniel's pillow. He no longer seemed uneasy about the closeness, and Daniel couldn't resist a laugh. He patted the dog's flank. "You're a bed hog, you know." Bravo thumped his tail, eyes half-lidded in contentment. Daniel sank onto the mattress, gaze drifting to the framed photograph on the nightstand. It showed them side by side before that fateful deployment, both younger but not necessarily happier. War had stolen so much, yet somehow they'd found a way to reclaim what truly mattered. Morning dawned bright and clear. With the legal battles resolved, Daniel packed his meager belongings, settling the bill at the front desk. The innkeeper refused to let him pay for his last 2 nights. "I insist," she said, teary-eyed. "You're family now." Touched, Daniel thanked her, then loaded his truck with the small duffel bag and Bravo's new supplies. The dog hopped into the passenger seat with a confidence Daniel hadn't seen in him before, tail wagging in anticipation. As they drove, Daniel took a detour through the quiet farmland. The rolling pastures glimmered in the early sunlight, and every so often cows lifted their heads to watch the truck pass. Willow Creek Farm caught Daniel's attention, so he pulled over, noticing Farmer Lawson near a fence. "Well," Daniel called out, stepping onto the grass, "looks like we'll be sticking around." Lawson set down his tools and ambled over. "I heard. Congratulations, truly. If you're looking for a place with more space, my neighbor's property is for sale. Old couple retired last year. House is small, but there's good land." Daniel crouched to rub Bravo's ears, considering. A small house near farmland might be exactly what they needed. Peace, routine, a chance to heal from past wounds. "I might just look into that," he said, peering across the landscape. The thought of open fields where Bravo could roam safely held enormous appeal. Lawson patted Daniel's shoulder. "You come by any time, we'll get you set up." As Daniel headed back to the truck, Bravo bounded beside him, looking at the pastures as if he already belonged there. The dog's posture radiated calm, a warrior finally allowed to rest. A few days later, Dr. Thompson came by to do a quick home visit at the small rental Daniel found. The place needed work, peeling paint, creaky floorboards, but it felt promising. Bravo trotted through each room, investigating corners and sniffing the yard's fence line. The vet approved, praising the quiet environment and remarking how much more relaxed Bravo seemed. "He's in good hands," she said softly, handing Daniel the final health certificate to complete the adoption. "You've both come a long way." That afternoon, Daniel hammered a simple wooden sign at the end of the driveway, "Stone and Bravo." It wasn't fancy, but it symbolized everything they'd achieved. The letters were slightly crooked. Daniel never claimed to be a craftsman, but the significance made his chest tighten with emotion. At dusk, he and Bravo walked the perimeter of the yard, a ritual that reminded Daniel of old patrols, except this time there were no threats lurking. When the sun disappeared behind the hills, they headed inside, the last rays of golden light following them through the door. In the living room, Daniel tossed Bravo the same tennis ball they had practiced retrieving by the pond. Bravo caught it easily, trotting back with a playful spark. Each bounce of the ball tapped into a sense of possibility. No more waiting for official letters, no more dread of separation. The chapters of war and bureaucracy had closed. In their place stood a gentle hush, broken only by the hush of leaves in the backyard and the patter of Bravo's paws on the wooden floor. That night, Daniel sat on the porch steps, Bravo lying contentedly at his side. Crickets sang in the tall grass, and a soft breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. Above them, stars began to emerge, one by one. He laid a hand on Bravo's shoulders and felt the steady rhythm of the dog's breathing. They had endured heartbreak, violence, and a system that almost tore them apart. Yet in this quiet moment, Daniel realized something. The bond they forged in the chaos of war was now tempered by hope. Bravo was finally free to be just a dog, and Daniel free to be just a man who refused to abandon him. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl hooted. Bravo's ears twitched, but he didn't rise. He simply pressed closer, as though acknowledging Daniel's presence was enough to keep the world at bay. Daniel let his eyes drift shut for a moment. His home might be modest, his future plans uncertain, but his heart felt unexpectedly full. Tomorrow they would wake to a sunrise with no fear of reactivation orders. Tomorrow they could enjoy the mundane blessings, morning walks, quiet breakfasts, and slow evenings on the porch. A faint smile touched Daniel's lips as he opened his eyes and gazed at the stars. He stroked Bravo's fur, recalling the storms they had survived together. The old nightmares might never fully vanish, but neither would the loyalty that sustained them both. They had found each other across continents and through years of separation. Now, no legal letter or distant commander could break that bond. War had changed them, but here, under the watchful sky, they discovered that something beautiful could still grow from the ashes. He leaned closer, whispering into Bravo's ear, "We made it, buddy. This time, we're home for good."